In the mood for fall? You've come to the right place. Today I thought we would make ourselves some awesome dollar store fall DIY signs. Well, it's that time of year, pumpkin spice and everything nice. And I thought that to start fall, it might be a good idea to welcome it. So let's do that by making ourselves some really nice, I think high-end, you can let me know what you think later on, signs made from dollar store materials. And a little bit of Cricut. A little bit. Just a little bit. So let's get our DIY on.
Okay, for this first fall sign DIY, you're just gonna need 3 of those pumpkins you can get from the Dollar Tree. You're gonna wanna remove the raffia bow, the leaf, and the string that's used to hang it. Okay, my dollar store carries these gorgeous decorative rolls of burlap, and I simply traced those out, making sure that the orange part of the pumpkin was facing upwards so that when you decoupage these down, your fabric's going to face the right way. And you're going to want to do this to the back of the pumpkin, not the front of the pumpkin, because you don't want that orange to show through. And then I just used some outdoor decoupage because I'm planning on putting this on my front porch. Even though it'll be far away from the elements, I still think, yeah, it's a good idea to use the outdoor if you're going to be putting this anywhere outdoor. Make sure that you press out any of those air bubbles that might be under the burlap. I also cut out a pumpkin from a bit of drop cloth that I got from Dollar Tree. I chose a different decorative burlap roll for each of the 2 pumpkins that were going to be covered in burlap, and then I gave them each a really generous coat of the outdoor decoupage so that it would protect it on the top. The drop cloth pumpkin, I created a little fall message to be cut out on my Cricut machine on some flat black heat transfer vinyl, and then using my Cricut press, I adhered it to the front of the pumpkin. Now I'm using Make Market heat transfer vinyl. I wanted to test it out. Michael's has been having a lot of great sales with it, and quite frankly, I really liked it. I like both their heat transfer vinyl and their temporary vinyl and permanent vinyl, and I'm curious to see how well it holds out. And then I just removed the backing from the decal. And then to adhere the pumpkins, I used an old wooden dowel that I had, big thick wooden dowel, and using a bit of wood glue, I attached each of the pumpkins to the front of the pole, making them a little cattywampus, not completely straight, with the pumpkin with the message in the middle. And there you go. The fall sign is done. I love this sign. It's going to sit proudly by the front door. But tell me, what do you think? Okay, I have a collection of these long rectangular frames from Dollarama. Really, you just need any rectangular frame. There doesn't need to be a front backing, and you don't need the tongs in the back. So really, you could even just make this out of some spare wood. And then I gave the entire thing just a light coat of white paint. I wanted it to give it a distressed sort of chippy look, so when the paint was still sort of wet and damp, I went in with a dry rag and just removed some of it. Okay, Dollar Tree has these trio of pumpkins with Happy Fall Y'all on the front. You just need to remove Happy that's 3D. Okay, one of the pumpkins I was gonna cover in burlap, so I decided to paint it out white so that you wouldn't be able to see the message underneath. And then I simply just cut out some burlap, again that decorative burlap, and flipped it around so that the decorative part was actually facing down. Now you could face it up if you want, but I wanted to hand paint this myself. I'll stencil paint it, so I did it with the decorative part down, and then I just used some basic decoupage, or sorry, Mod Podge, and decoupaged that entire burlap down. And then using some stencils that I found, I can't remember if it was Dollar Tree or Dollarama, but you can often find really pretty stencils at either place, and some basic white chalk paint and a stencil brush. I just pounced up and down, adding a little bit of the paint to the burlap with the stencil. I wasn't going for perfection here. I wanted it to look a little bit worn. For the second pumpkin, I decided to use some craft paper. I just Mod Podged that down onto the front of the pumpkin, and then using scissors cut out as closely to the pumpkin as I could get. Now for those areas like the stem that are going to be a little bit more difficult to remove, I just cut some slits into the paper around those areas, making it easier later on. Now the easiest way to remove paper from any shape when you're DIYing with Mod Podge is to use, believe it or not, some sandpaper. So just moving that up and down motion with your sandpaper, slowly making sure you stay in one direction, it will eventually very neatly and cleanly remove that paper with really very little effort. You can also use an emery board. Around those difficult areas, this is where those slits are going to help. Now for each pumpkin, I decided to use a different stencil motif, and I also decided to decorate them each a little bit differently. So this one I think I'm going to completely cover in the stencil. And for the third pumpkin, I just used some faux burlap paper that I found at Michael's, and using the same sandpaper technique, making sure that the edges were nice and crisp and clean. Going in again with a different stencil. To arrange the pumpkins, you're going to want to make sure that you have them spaced out equally, and then just use a little bit of wood glue and some hot glue. The wood glue for long-term hold, the hot glue for a quick fix, and adhere each of the pumpkins to the front of your frame. And there you have it, something so simple and easy and inexpensive to make, and yet, in my humble opinion, you let me know what you think. I think it looks like you could have bought it from some high-end home decor store. One of my recent videos, I used this exact same frame for a summer sign, and now we're going to turn it into a fall sign. I'll leave the link to the other one just above. I decided to keep the summer sign, and I have a collection of these frames, so I had a bunch of extra backings, and so I painted the original image out with some of my favorite milk jug chalk paint. Using some Mod Podge and a roll of burlap ribbon that I got from Dollar Tree, I just adhered that to the front and then hot glued it to the back. Now you're going to want to cut out 5 pumpkins to make this DIY using your Cricut machine. I decided to go with white, cream, and 1 orange pumpkin. I also went with Make Market temporary vinyl. If you wanted to, since this is on burlap, you could use a heat transfer vinyl. I just knew that I was going to change this up and didn't really want to spend the extra money on heat transfer vinyl. I also went with 3 different pumpkin looks so that everything wouldn't be exactly the same. Then weed each of your pumpkins, put some transfer tape on the front, and then I recommend you start from the middle when you're arranging your pumpkins on. So I put on the first pumpkin, making sure to scrape down really, really well, because again, this is, temporary vinyl on a burlap fabric. So I made sure that, I really pressed down on that Cricut scraper and then slowly removed the transfer tape to show each of the pumpkins beneath. To make sure that all your pumpkins are lined up straight, it might be helpful to use a ruler. At least I know I always need one. Because we adhered burlap to the front and sides of the backing, it might be a little bit of a tight fit. So I found it helpful to remove the tongs and then just pop it in. And there you have it. Because of the thick frame, you can either just place it down on like a buffet or something, or hang it on your wall. Okay, this next DIY is a bit of a cheeky, fun, dual-sided one. So you can often find these easels at, any dollar store. Personally, for my home decor, a darker wood color matched better, so I went in with some antiquing wax, but this step is completely optional. However, if you do this step, make sure that you get all the surfaces of the original wood color covered, including the inside, because when you open the easel, you'll be able to see all of it. You're going to want to go in with some plain black chalk paint. You could even even use acrylic paint if you wanted. It really doesn't matter. I just happen to have a bunch of black onyx chalk paint from Art Mines that really needed to be used up. And this might take a couple of coats because you're going to want to really cover that front message, making sure that you get close to the edges. For this simple DIY for fall, you're just going to need some basic vinyl in flat white. I'm using Make Market because I wanted to see how it worked, and again, I was quite happy with it. And then once you've weeded out your image and applied it to some transfer tape, you're going to want to put one of each of the messages on each side of the sign. Now, I know that one of my signs is a little risque, so feel free to use a different one if you aren't a fan of that one, but my kids are grown and I thought it was kind of funny. And then once you have both decals in place, that's it. You're done. It's really that simple. Remove your transfer tape and find a place in your home to put it. Okay, for this last fall sign DIY, we're just going to use some milk jug paint, and I had this thick sign board from the dollar store and I just painted out the message that was front. Now this did take a couple of coats to cover up those words. While the board was drying, I took the leaves that I took off of those 3 pumpkins that we used in the first DIY, headed outside, and with a little bit of copper spray paint just gave them a couple of quick coats. I had to give the copper a bit of an oxidized look, so I went in with Seaside Villa from Folk Art, Antique Aqua from Art Mines, and Succulent also from Art Mines in order to create this faux oxidized look on the copper leaves. Now this step is completely optional. You could leave them just copper if that's what you like. Personally, I like the little added pop of color, and I think that it gives the whole overall finished look a bit more interest. To create this look, just use a little tiny paintbrush and go between the different colors of the paint, applying them sort of scattered on each of the leaves. I went for a different look for each of the leaves to make it look a little bit more realistic, I guess you could say. I don't know if they look realistic, but. And then using some hot glue, you just want to adhere each of the leaves onto your wood plaque. Now, I wanted to make it look like the leaves were dancing. You could make these all, straight, but I think if you make them look a little cattywampus, it kind of looks like leaves blowing in the wind. I attached a picture hook to the back so that I could hang it if I wanted, but you could also just rest it on a tabletop.
If you liked that video, please make sure that you subscribe, give me a thumbs up. If you hit the notification bell, it'll tell you when I upload next. Oh, and you might enjoy these.